This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Discussions at the Roundtable. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Mr. David Simon to the show. Now, Mr. Simon is the founder and president of Simon Brothers Media, a consulting and advisory firm, and he's on the board of directors for Fan Film Limited, where he has produced film and television documentaries. He's a sought-after expert witness for entertainment litigation matters with over 20 years of experience. Mr. Simon, thank you so much for joining me here today at the Roundtable.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Of course. Let's jump into it. So you've been in the entertainment business since, at least the late 80s. How did you first become involved in expert witnessing?
Well, I've been in the entertainment business actually since the mid 70s.
Wow.
But I got involved in the expert witness business sort of, I didn't plan on it. And was asked to opine on a case involving a logo, which was something I had a lot of experience in over the years.
Is it something that you were actively seeking out, or did they just find you?
They just found me. I really hadn't thought about it before.
First of all, when was this? How long ago was it when you first got these first calls?
Let's see, I'd say 1995.
Okay, so it was in the mid 90s when you started expert witnessing. You'd been in entertainment for a long time, and you get this call. And so, what sorts of things did you think about expert witnessing? What were your expectations heading into this first engagement?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to look at whatever the case is and determine, number one, whether you're the right person for it. And also, depending on whose side you're on, the plaintiff or the defendant, you really have to decide whether or not you agree with it. And that's the way I've approached it from the very beginning.
Sure. How do you make that determination? What are the sorts of factors that go into the calculus? Oh, am I the right person for this? Beyond just having the appropriate experience, what are some of the other things, the intangibles that you look for?
I think a lot of it has to do, especially now with the way the business has morphed into a much larger and more complex, media, and it's keeping up with what's been going on in the particular aspects of the business in which I am supposed to, provide my expert opinion.
Sure.
So I have to look at the areas in which I feel that I've had the experience, that I'm up to date on what's going on in that particular aspect, and again, whether or not I can, with my hand on my heart, say that I agree with whomever has asked me to opine.
So you talk about staying up to date. Now, every industry is different. For your industry, what are some of the things that you do to kind of stay abreast with what's going on in your field, with the most current thinking and goings on? How do you stay current?
Well, part of it is, working in it. And through that, I see changes every day, both in companies and methods and methodology. And also, it's whether or not, I really soak up information about the industry. So I'm reading not just the normal what used to be Hollywood Reporter and Variety or something. And I'm into a lot of other more specific kinds of data and information related to the changes in the business or the changes in the players of business.
Have you done any industry reporting or written for any of the trade publications or taken interviews or anything like that?
I've had a couple of interviews. I've also written a couple of articles on valuation of feature films and the vertical integration of media companies and especially media conglomerates.
Once you've taken interviews and written in articles and maybe use social media, anything like that, how do you keep track of all the things you've said in case the opposing side at some point wants to use something that you've said either to twist it in some way, or maybe you've changed your opinion on something? How do you keep track of the different things that you've said over the years, and how do you respond when somebody tries to use that to impeach you?
Um, Normally, well, first of all, I keep a record of everything. My hard drive or my cloud is busting at the seams. Um, but in terms of impeaching me, it I've been very consistent in especially in the cases where it involved valuation of either a television series or feature film. And I feel very comfortable, being able to rebut whatever they're trying to put in my mouth, words they want to put in my mouth.
Does that sort of thing typically come up during depositions?
Yeah, yeah, I will. I mean, not necessarily going back and looking at uh, my articles, but it would be in previous testimony in other cases. But I it may be boring, but to hear, but I am consistent in the methodology that I use, and um, I spent more than a decade, actually 2 decades, as a buyer and a scheduler, and even on the sales side of things, and working for large companies like Disney and Fox and DreamWorks. So I've had that hands-on experience, and I've had to make those uh, uh, estimates or calculate based on comparison, and that involves a lot of different areas to compare.
You mentioned a changing landscape. Has that impacted the way that you go about expert witnessing to any extent? Has the changing structure of entertainment and media had an impact on your day-to-day work as an expert witness?
It does have an impact. Speaking from as an ex-studio guy and somebody who is either working with the studio or working against the studio, some of the studios are a lot more difficult to deal with, and you're not going to be able to get. They won't commit to anything, so you can't get to the point where there is discovery, for instance. So you're working with, an algebraic formula. But I've been able to, in most cases, I've been able to build at least a basic model that can be used.
What are some of the preparation techniques that you find helpful when going into a deposition or even going into a trial? Are there things that attorneys should be doing that work particularly well for you?
Yeah, I obviously not getting into names or cases, but some attorneys are working right alongside you and really seem to care about what I think. There are other attorneys, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but they will want me to adjust my testimony based on something they think is important that I don't necessarily agree with or I wouldn't normally use in my testimony or my expert report. So and that's seldom. But
Sure.
also when you're going into deposition and prepping with the attorney or the attorney and the team, um, that's very important because you really, it's not like you're reading a script. It's just that you're prepared for all the answers. And as much as, I don't get stage fright, it's still sometimes, you get an excellent attorney on the other side who's really good at trying to get somebody to go. And you know, you have to sort of ignore that. And when you do take a break, some attorneys don't want to talk during the break, which is crazy, in my opinion. And it's not like they're telling me what to say; they're telling me whether I am hitting on all cylinders, so to speak.
Sure.
So that's important to be able to have that opportunity before and during.
Regarding not getting kind of frazzled by the opponent by the opposing counsel, is that just something that comes from experience, or are there specific techniques that you use? Like, do you have a cup of tea before you go on, or is there something that works for you to keep you kind of calm, cool, and collected when they are peppering you with potentially difficult or embarrassing questions?
I tend to I don't really have a cup of tea. I'll have my bottle of water around, but the way to get around any kind of losing tempers or whatever is to just slow things down and to not only remind myself but to remind opposing counsel that I wrote a report, and let's go to the report because on page whatever, this is what I said, and if you're trying to tell me I said something else, that's not true.
Do you keep a copy of the report with you when you're giving testimony so you can refer back to it? I know
Yes.
that not all jurisdictions, I think California is one of them that might not allow it in all situations, but is that something that you recommend?
Yeah, I think it's important. Not only, I mean, this isn't like taking a test. You're not trying to, get a good score on the SAT. You're um, backing up something that you spent numerous hours researching and formulating and writing. And I think it's only fair that the expert witness should be able to refer to the report that they're questioning me about.
One of the things that I've been exploring lately, speaking of reports, are visual aids, both in the context of the reports, but then also during testimonies, in particularly trial testimony when a jury might be looking at it.
Yeah.
Do you have experience using visual aids? And if so, what works?
I think if you're trying to prove a point, that for instance, that a producer ripped off another producer's idea. Visual aids are really good because whether they're static, as a photograph or a comparison photograph of two, or a clip, or sometimes it has to do with audience research or demographics that prove the point. You're ripping off my kids show. Well, no, I'm not, because actually look at the demographics of
Right.
the show that I'm, representing, and the demographics are, women 18 to 34.
So when you do employ these sorts of demonstratives, do you put those together yourself, or does somebody from the trial team help with that?
It's a combination. Sometimes I have something that is, perfect, and I'll, bring it up to the team, and they, wow, that's great. Let's put it in. The other would be, if you've got a really good team with resourceful people, they'll be finding things. And what's interesting is, and I find this in expert testimony and cases anyway, is that, for an attorney who's not an expert in a particular field, whether it's entertainment or it's medical or it's you know, steelworks or something, or airplane building. But I'm very impressed with several of the legal teams I've worked with who they have the basic understanding, and they ask me the right questions to just get them over the top. It's like doing the high jump, and you need that extra quarter inch
Right.
or millimeter or whatever they call it now. But that's really important to me. It makes it I think it makes the whole team feel comfortable, and we end up with a better report and a better deposition, and if it goes to court or arbitration, your testimony, and that's the most important thing. The times that I've worked with people who have a limited understanding of what they are complaining about, it is difficult, because unless they're open to me wanting to tell them, it's kind of hard to keep on saying, but you're going down the wrong road, and no, I wouldn't say that, or I wouldn't have done it that way. And, the people that I'm working with have their senior partners, and the senior partners, managing partners. If it's a big case, they're putting pressure, and that pressure then comes down on the expert. And I've only had a couple of times where that's happened, and it all worked out in the end. But I would feel, more confident for the case if, it's like when people hire me as a consultant. The first thing I tell them is I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you the truth, or I'm
Right.
going to tell you how it really works. And that sometimes just right away you'd say, you know what, I don't think we're going to work together. And that has not happened, by the way, with expert witness. That has happened in consulting. But I pride myself on the knowledge and experience and expertise that I've built over the last almost 50 years. And it's, to have somebody, doesn't matter what age they are, they could be 65 or 35, to tell me, no, that isn't what we want to say. And I said, but that's not the case. And that isn't something I can, you know, like I said before, hand on heart, tell you that's what I really believe. So there are times when you just have to be uh, brutally honest. And I, I'm very, I'm a team player. And if I can try to maneuver certain things in a certain way that isn't uncomfortable for me, I'm all for it.
Sure, like if you can provide, for example, an alternative maybe that gets you to the same place but that you feel better about.
Exactly, exactly.
You had we talked a little bit about trial teams. What is it like working on a bigger team with that might have several attorneys, might have multiple experts? To what extent do you interface with all of the different people, or do you mainly work alone? How does a trial team work?
That's a really good question. I've worked with, solo lawyers, who work out of their office at home, but have a great case. And, either they know me from previous life or whatever, or they were recommended, I was recommended by somebody we both know. And that's a lot easier and less potential for confrontation. I don't really, I don't want to overdo the using confrontation is probably not even the right word.
Sure.
It's just misunderstanding. Um, Working with a large team with a national, offices in, or international for that matter, in LA, New York, Chicago, Boston, London, Tokyo. And, they've got superb people. The managing partners are people, that everybody, both attorneys and non-attorneys bow down to because they're so well known and have accomplished so much. Um, but as I mentioned before, sometimes the um, direct contact or the person, the attorney that I have the most contact with, and the one who basically hires me, um, will get pressure, whether it's from another partner or from another attorney who's handling another expert. And I don't, so far, I've never worked with any other experts.
Ah,
It's always been siloed. And I think that's really good because it's up to the attorney and the client, obviously, what they want to use and what they don't want to use.
one of the things that you had mentioned beyond trial teams earlier on was working for both the plaintiff and defendant side. Are
Not
there
both,
any?
not both. I've worked one or the other.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
It would be yeah, it'd be quite
Duh.
the engagement to be on both sides. Sure. Have you noticed? Is there a significant difference in the way that you work as an expert witness for the plaintiff versus working for on the defendant side?
I get very um, involved in the case. I mean, I start to take it personally, especially when it's something I know, if I'm on the defendant side, uh, then, why? I mean, it's so obvious that they didn't do anything wrong, and here's why. Um, but at the same time, when you're the plaintiff, um, how could a studio mismanage the payment of royalties or whatever it is? Um, it there really isn't much difference. I mean, I've worked let's see, 25 cases, I think now, and two of them have been as the defendant's expert, and the rest of them have been the plaintiff. Um, I will say that the one, and I don't know if you were going to ask this or not, but in your notes, you had mentioned class action. And
Right.
I've been involved with a few class action cases, and I find them really strange. It's not the cut and dry um, kind of case that you have, with something that's not class action, and it tends to be that the attorneys are not really have not really studied up on the subject matter. So in one case, it's great because they're relying on me as an
Sure.
expert and your other experts to provide, true and accurate information. On the other hand, if they don't understand it, then they might. There have been times when they said, "Well, this doesn't really matter in the case." I said, "No, actually, this is the whole case right here." And again, I'm not trying to sell myself here at all, and but I find that I just want to have a great relationship with whomever I'm working, and so, it's usually the senior and then the of counsel or a newer attorney who's getting their footing, and it's good. I mean, it just depends on the team, and personality doesn't really enter into it. Although I do appreciate working with younger attorneys who don't know our business at all, and telling them stories from my past. And they just, we go off on tangents because they want to hear more stories about Rupert Murdoch or Steven Spielberg or something. So
Does that kind of rapport enhance the engagement? Does being in that kind of collegial environment ultimately help the end client, just because you're in a good mood, you're doing your best? Is there something to that, or does it truly not matter?
no, it does matter. That collegial atmosphere and relationship is really important. And when it's really, really top drawer, it's when not only the people you're working with directly, but their bosses, the partners they report to, are, they'll come into it every 3 meetings and if some, because they're also looking at from 30,000 feet up,
Right.
and they might see something. What if you push this a little bit more? Do you feel comfortable with that? And I love when they ask that question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that reflects what I've heard from other expert witnesses that have been on the show. You had mentioned earlier, just kind of in passing, about arbitration. Have you done any alternative dispute resolution sorts of actions?
Yeah, I have. Well, the unfortunately, they haven't gotten to the point of sitting in front of the arbitrator.
Ah, I see.
It's all the lead up to, and you get to that point where, okay, next Tuesday you're on, and um, or we're doing a deposition, and then, the following week you're going to testify. That's usually when they settle.
Sure.
Uh, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not doing this. I don't sit there with that like a cab driver. They still have cab drivers, right? With my meter running. I mean, I if anything, I think I give away more than and then well, anyway,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying.
Sure, absolutely. Well, how about in the lead up itself? Even if you haven't been to the big show, uh, is the lead up to an arbitration significantly different than the lead up to a typical court action?
I'll tell you that normally I would say no, but it sometimes it depends on who the arbitrator is, because it may be a retired judge that uh, all the lawyers involved, both sides, knew and worked in their courtroom, or it may be somebody that's got a lot of experience in our business, and that that makes the approach different. So it's I think a it's not much different. I mean, I know it's very different, but in technically, but my job is to put together my version of the case for them.
Do you still do a report?
Yeah, usually, and I really enjoy doing the reports. I'm not a mathematician, Harvard Business School type of guy with charts and things like that. But I am very number oriented, and it's a matter of finding evidence and building that. And so there's a lot of research that needs to be done. And of course, it's always helpful if you're able to get numbers from during discovery.
Without naming any names or specific actions, unless you're at liberty to do so, are there any cases or actions that you've been a part of that have led to any aha moments or significantly changed or even reinforced the way that you go about expert witnessing? Any seminal cases in your career as an expert witness?
Yeah, the case that's referred to as the Ladd case, which was one of the first ones I was involved in, which was Alan Ladd Jr. and his partner versus Warner Brothers Entertainment, relating to 12 feature films that they felt were being undervalued. And during that case, I had two, more than 8 hour days of deposition, asking questions like, okay, so much about movies, what year was Maltese Falcon made? Like that has anything to do with it.
Did they really hit you with ones like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, but what was great is in Discovery, I was able to get a hold of all of their contracts and look at the titles that our client owned, and look at the other titles to see how much they were valued. Were they high, low, were they right on? And I've used that model pretty much from then. I'm still using it, and that case also was the Ladd won, and Warner Brothers appealed it, and the appeals court upheld the original award and judged with my testimony and my report. So I felt really proud of that.
Of course. Does that sort of action being involved in kind of a higher profile case like that, especially one that you're on the winning side of, does that lead to more business? Do people call you because of things like that?
Yeah, I have had either people referred me and to similar cases, or people with similar cases had found out, that I was one of the witnesses, one of the experts who was involved in that. So it's, I don't go around advertising. It's really, I don't knock on people's doors and ask. I mean, if somebody is interested, I'm more than happy to help and obviously look at it and see.
Along those lines, have expert witness referral services been of value to you?
I'd say a third of my cases have come through referrals.
Oh,
and there's only been, and it wasn't the referral company's fault, but there was only one that ended up with a client that didn't want to pay, and it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with they didn't want to pay anything. But it was all resolved, and I do feel comfortable working with referral companies.
Speaking of not getting paid, do you try to protect yourself, or is there anything specific that you like to do in contracts to either take a retainer or have any special terms in there to protect you from those sorts of situations?
Yeah, I generally will ask for a retainer, an evergreen retainer, so that pay me $10, and when I've earned $10, you pay me another $10.
Oh, sure.
Sort of like on a monthly basis. And it's, I think it's really important to have mutual trust. And I've never had anyone come back to me and say, "Whoa, your hours are ridiculous." It's like, because they realize a lot of it has to do with research and finding great examples or comparisons.
Besides the instance that you were just speaking about, where somebody tried to not pay you, have you had any other negative experiences that kind of served as learning experiences?
Just, I think I would have rather the way my deposition was prepared, it wasn't the way I was used to in all the other, or most of the other cases. And it really is, it's okay though. I mean, as long as you have the open door and can tell them that afterwards, it's a learning experience.
Do you typically find that sort of proactive approach is helpful when you can just go to your attorney and say, "Hey, there's a little bit of a problem with X, Y, or Z. Can we fix this?" Is that one, something that you usually feel that you do have that ability, and two, is that useful?
Yeah, on both counts. It's I have used it, and I do find it helpful.
Before we wrap up, do you have any last advice for expert witnesses, and in particular newer expert witnesses, or even attorneys that are working with expert witnesses?
I would, do the for the attorneys at least. I would recommend they do the Vulcan mind meld with their experts and try and get in their heads. And I am certainly not a lawyer, and I respect and appreciate how attorneys have spent so much time studying the law and actually practicing. And all I ask is that somebody recognize that in return. And again, I'm not saying people don't. It's just there are times when are you the expert or am I?
Right, absolutely. Mutual respect is the best policy. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Simon, for joining me here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to our listeners for joining me for another discussion at the Roundtable. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening apps.